You are easily replaced. His hand stays closed around my wrist when he says it. His voice doesn't rise. It never does. Cruelty doesn't need volume when it has a court full of witnesses trained not to react. Pulling away only makes him say it twice, and 3 years have taught my body to hold still instead. Behind him, the window shows a city that has never once let the sun stay past 3 in the afternoon. The photograph tucked against my ribs is the only proof left that something inside me still belongs to no one but me. If you have ever loved someone who looked at you like a stranger wearing your husband's face, you already know why this is being told. Whether this story ends in ruin or in something worth staying for isn't clear yet. Saying it out loud, even to a voice in the dark that will never be met, is the only thing that helps right now. Stay if you understand what it costs to love a man who has stopped choosing you. Some of you already do. The Great Hall of Juno's Ice Court holds 400 years of frost in its stone, and none of it has ever thawed for the woman walking through it now. 17 steps separate the double doors from the seat at the long table. Counting has become a habit lately, the way a person handles something that might shatter if moved too fast. It used to be 19 steps, before this body stopped taking up as much room as it used to. Rosario sits at the head of the table, spine straight, eyes fixed on a point past my shoulder. 11 days now without a direct look. The number is easy to keep because so little else is. You're late, he says. Not a question. A verdict already delivered. The healer kept me. True as far as it goes. What goes unsaid is that Caesar's men stood outside the healer's door the whole time, close enough to hear everything, far enough to deny they were listening. Caesar sits at Rosario's right hand, where he has sat longer than this wife has been alive. His gaze rests on the space between the two of them, measuring it like a man checking a wall he built himself. The queen's health is a delicate matter, Caesar says, and the word queen comes out sounding like an accusation. Perhaps fewer visits from outside the household would serve her better. The room agrees with him before anyone speaks a word. That's how it works here. Consensus arrives ahead of conversation. Less isn't the problem. The words come out level, though both hands have found each other behind my back, gripping tight enough to leave small marks that will still be there tomorrow. Someone in this room remembering I'm still in it. That's the problem. The silence that follows has texture. Reading the silences of this court took time, the way other women learn to read faces, and this one is an embarrassment. It's calculation. Someone deciding what a sentence should cost. Rosario's jaw moves, barely, like a man biting down on words that want out. For half a second something crosses his face that isn't coldness at all. It looks almost like pain. Then it's gone. The council will decide what's best for the household, he says, and the word household instead of family lands somewhere under the ribs and stays there. Leaving before the meal ends draws no objection. Nobody stops the departure. That, more than anything spoken tonight, says exactly where things stand. The east corridor still smells like something other than cold stone and old wax. Odalise keeps dried lavender in the linen closets there, a small rebellion nobody has noticed enough to forbid. Most nights end with a stop in that corridor, not for linens, but for 4 minutes of air that hasn't been arranged around someone else's comfort. Tonight the closet door won't open. The handle gives nothing the first time. A second try does no better. A third, harder, changes nothing either, only proves the point. There's a new lock where none stood yesterday, small and brass and deliberate, the kind of addition that means someone walked through this corridor, decided this small comfort was a problem, and solved it without a word of warning. A long moment passes with one palm flat against the wood, listening to nothing. The castle doesn't creak the way old houses do in the stories. It holds its silence the way everyone in it does, on purpose, as if speaking might cost something none of us can afford to lose twice. Down the hall, a painting is missing. Walking past, it almost happens without notice. That wall has been passed 100 times without registering the woman who used to hang there, dark-haired, crowned, painted in a style nobody uses anymore. Now there's only a rectangle of unfaded plaster where 4 centuries of dust never settled, and a single nail still holding nothing at all. A servant polishing the sconces, nearby, gets asked who she was. The girl doesn't look up from her work. "No one, my lady. There was never a portrait there." Her hands never stop moving. Neither does the finger tracing the outline of the missing frame in the plaster dust, over and over, chasing something that was never learned in the first place. Rosario finds this corridor without announcing his arrival. He never does. That's one of the small cruelties of loving something that doesn't need to breathe or step or announce itself the way a body does. He is simply there, closer than court manners allow, close enough to catch the cold stone scent that clings to him even indoors, and beneath it, faint, something warmer, something remembered from before everything went wrong between them. "You shouldn't be down here alone." His voice has dropped the flatness from dinner. For a moment it sounds like a voice, once known well. There was a painting here. Something moves behind his eyes, fast, gone before it can be named. "You're imagining things." "I'm not, Ashley." My own name in his mouth still does something worth hating, even now, even after everything. Let it go. "Why?" No answer comes. For 3 full seconds his eyes hold steady the way they used to, before the coldness, before the silences with texture, before footsteps started needing to be counted. His hand lifts an inch off his side like it wants to reach, and has forgotten it isn't allowed to anymore. Then his face closes like a door somewhere behind his eyes decided the visit was over. "Go to bed," he says, and the warmth is gone so completely that doubting it ever existed would be easy, except this whole body is still leaning toward where it was. He walks away first. He always does now. The corridor holds a long silence after, one hand pressed flat against the plaster where a queen used to hang, the photograph against my ribs the only steady thing left in a castle built entirely out of things nobody will say out loud. Still here. The thought arrives unbidden, and there's no telling anymore whether it's meant for him, or a reminder aimed inward. Odalise finds this corridor still occupied, one hand still flat against the empty plaster, long after Rosario's footsteps have faded past hearing. She doesn't ask what's happening here. The only person left in this castle who doesn't ask, who simply sets her candle on the sill and waits until the feet underneath this body are ready to move again. "You should not be here alone," she says, echoing him without knowing it, and that repetition scrapes worse than the words themselves. That's the second time tonight, because it's true twice over. Her eyes check both directions of the corridor, the habit she's taught, checking a room before anything that matters gets said in it.
"Come."
Not here. 3 floors down follow her lead, past the laundry rooms, into the old records hall nobody has used since before this marriage began. The air down here carries something different, drier, older, the particular smell of paper that has sat undisturbed long enough to become closer to dust than book. Odalise lights a second candle from the first. The flame gutters once against a draft with no clear source, then steadies. "You asked about the portrait," she says. Stillness takes over this whole body before the mind can catch up to why. "You know who she was." "I know what the records say," which isn't the same as knowing who she was, because someone made sure of that. A ledger comes down from a shelf high enough that she has to rise onto the balls of her feet to reach it, dust blown from the spine before it lands on the table between us. This is the household ledger. Births.
Deaths.
Physicians' notes. Every queen who has stood in this hall for 400 years has a page in here. Unsteady hands open it, though the cold gets the blame for that. The pages carry generations of handwriting gone brown with age, and my own name surfaces faster than expected, faster than feels right. Ashley Summers entered the year this marriage began, the year everything in this life started belonging to someone else's account of it. The page reads once through. Then again, slower because the first pass got rejected by a mind that refused what it was seeing. 2 dates sit beside the word loss, both in Caesar's hand. Both dated 3 weeks before either pregnancy ever showed on a physician's chart. The candle flickers. No hand moves to steady it. This can't be right. Comes out smaller than intended. These are dated before anyone even knew. I know. Before I knew, Odalise. A thumb presses hard against the ink, as if pressure alone could push it back into the past and undo whatever hand wrote it there. How does a man write down a loss before there's anything to lose? She doesn't answer right away. That silence is how the worse answer announces itself before words do. Because he wasn't recording what happened, she says finally. He was recording what he intended. Sitting down happens without a decision behind it. The chair is hard and cold through the fabric of this robe, and both hands grip the edge of a table that has outlived every woman who ever trusted this castle to keep her safe. For a long moment, nothing remains inside but a ringing kind of silence, like the moment after a bell stops and the ears are still catching up to the quiet. Then it arrives all at once, the way water finds every crack in a dam simultaneously instead of one at a time. Both of them were lost. Both, and a whole survivable version of that grief got built around it. Bad luck, a body that didn't cooperate, a womb that failed twice the way a mother's had failed once before. That private religion held everything together because the alternative was unlivable. The alternative was someone deciding, in advance, that those children would not be born. Say something, Odalise says quietly, and the silence has clearly gone on long enough to worry her. My hand keeps finding my own stomach, comes out at last, and there's nothing there right now. It just keeps happening. She doesn't ask for it to stop. Her hand closes the ledger gently instead, like something that might wake if handled too roughly, and for a while neither voice breaks the quiet. The candle burns. Somewhere above, footsteps cross a floor, then stop, then don't resume. Breath stays held without meaning to until they start moving away again. There is something else, Odalise says, once the silence has finished doing what it needed to do. Something that should have been told the first day this marriage brought a stranger to this court, and wasn't, because trust hadn't been earned yet in either direction. Her eyes find mine. There's an old law here. Older than Caesar. Older than most of what still stands. Her voice drops further, though nothing down here but the dust could overhear it. A queen named by prophecy cannot be harmed by any hand in this realm, mortal or immortal. Not exiled. Not silenced. Not touched. The law binds even the king who marries her, should he ever wish otherwise. What does that have to do with any of this? That portrait with no name, she says. Taken down most likely because someone feared what it proved. And this ledger in your hands may not be the only thing in this castle Caesar has spent years trying to erase. My own name sits under a stranger's ink, marking losses decided before anybody ever had a chance to feel them coming. For the first time since arriving in Juneau, the fear in this chest settles beside something else instead of underneath it. Something sharper. Something that doesn't flinch. Then it's time to find out, comes out steady now, who I am to him, that he'd write my grief down before I ever felt it. Odalise doesn't get the chance to answer. Boots. Above. Fast. More than one set. Moving with the weight of men told to hurry, who don't care what breaks along the way. Her hand snuffs the candle in the same motion the ledger disappears back onto its shelf, and in the black that follows her breath catches once, sharp, before her fingers find mine in the dark and pull toward the stairwell we didn't come down. He knows, she whispers, and no name needs asking after. How? Move, she says, and above us a door slams open hard enough to shake loose dust from 400 years of ceiling. Somewhere in that falling dust, Caesar's voice carries, flat and final, the last 3 words of an order landing clear enough to understand completely. Confine the queen. They didn't drag anyone through those halls. That detail keeps returning across 3 days shut inside these rooms. No hand laid on this body at all. Caesar's men simply stood in the doorway until the choice was made to walk through it, because the alternative was watching them decide whether escort needed to become something rougher. Walking through on my own feet felt, at the time, like strength. Some nights that certainty wavers. The window in this chamber faces east, away from the harbor, away from anything moving. 11 spires are visible from it, counted 11 times now. The number never changes, and neither does the view, and there's a particular kind of stillness that stops being peaceful once its purpose becomes clear. Containment, not protection. So memory has become the study instead. Not the man walking the halls now, no one gets near him anymore, but the version of Rosario still visited freely, the only one still allowed. The morning he found tears over a burned batch of bread insisted on being made without help, and instead of calling a servant to clean it up, he ate a piece anyway, straight-faced, calling it the finest thing tasted in 3 centuries. The way his thumb used to trace the inside of a wrist like reading something written there only he could see. These memories get turned over so often they've gone soft at the edges, the way a stone goes smooth from handling. Reaching for them still happens, and hating that fact changes nothing, because the alternative is an empty room with nothing in it but 11 spires and a lock on the outside of the door. He comes on the 3rd night. His arrival announces itself before sight does. Not footsteps, he doesn't need those, but a change in the air, a temperature the room didn't carry a moment before. Turning toward the sound finds him already inside, closer to the door than the window, like even now some part of him hasn't decided whether staying is the plan. You shouldn't be confined. Flat. Court flat. The dinner voice, the voice from every dinner across 11 days running. Tell that to the men outside my door. They're for your protection. From what? The words hold steady, though both hands have found each other again behind my back, gripping tight enough to leave marks that will still show tomorrow. From the truth in a ledger with your chief advisor's handwriting all over it. Something crosses his face. Fast there, and gone the way it went in the corridor by the missing portrait, but this time the watching is deliberate, and this time the whole shape of it gets caught before it disappears. His jaw tightens like a man biting down on a sound he isn't permitted to make. His eyes hold steady for 1 full second longer than they should, and in that second something surfaces that isn't coldness at all. It looks like a man drowning behind glass, watching someone on the shore, unable to make his mouth ask for help. You don't understand what you found, he says, and the words come out uneven, pulled from him at the wrong speed. Then explain it. I can't, he stops. Physically stops, one hand rising to his own throat like something inside is trying to close it. Ashley, listen to me. You need to leave the... His voice cuts off mid-word. Not trails off, cuts, the way a candle goes out when someone pinches the wick between 2 fingers. When he speaks again, it's the court voice, cold and finished, as if the last 4 seconds never happened at all. Go to bed, he says. The council meets in the morning, and I won't have you looking like this. No movement follows, not yet, because this whole body is still caught on the sound of my own name in that other voice, the one that broke through for 4 seconds like a hand breaking the surface of water before something underneath pulls it back down. Say that again. Comes out as a whisper. I said go to bed.
No. Before that.
My name, then something about leaving the sentence stops itself, because clarity has arrived, the kind that only comes after the easy answer stops being an option. You weren't talking to me. Not really. Something stopped you. No answer comes. But he doesn't leave either, and that absence of both cruelty and departure says more than a full confession would have. Crossing the room happens slowly, the way anyone approaches something wounded that might still have teeth. Up close there's a smell under the cold stone, one that clings to him always, something bitter, something that doesn't belong to him, like a perfume worn too long by someone else and never washed out. That smell has been met before. In the records hall. On the dust of that missing portrait's frame. Who's doing this to you? Gets asked, not as a question. Only one man in this castle benefits from a king who cannot finish his own warnings. Rosario's eyes hold steady, and for 1 more second the glass cracks again, watching him fight something behind his own face, watching his hand twitch toward mine and stop an inch short, close enough that the cold coming off his skin registers without either of us closing the distance. "I am still here," he says, so quietly it almost registers as an internal thought instead of his voice. Then the coldness slams back down over his features like a door closing from the other side, and he turns and leaves without another word, without looking back, the way a man leaves a room he isn't allowed to want to stay in. A long time passes alone in the dark after, one hand pressed to the place on this wrist where his almost was. Every night since arriving at this court carried the same conclusion. He stopped loving me. The man once married became someone else, and the only fool slow enough kept waiting for a version of him that no longer existed to come back. That conclusion was wrong. He never became someone else. Someone else has been standing inside him this whole time, wearing his voice like a borrowed coat, and for 4 seconds tonight, the fight to make it slip belonged entirely to him. Sleep doesn't come after he leaves. The dark holds one hand tracing the place on this wrist where it's almost landed, and somewhere around the 4th hour the grieving for the man once thought lost gives way to something more useful. Planning starts instead. A prisoner doesn't need forgiveness. He needs proof strong enough to break whatever's holding him, and the starting point is already clear. Whatever Caesar buried, he buried it somewhere no one was meant to think to dig. Odalise clears a path through the servants' passage 2 nights later, the guards at the door bribed with nothing more than an assumption that a pregnant woman confined for her health won't try the old chapel stairs. Wrong about the reason, right about the stairs. The crypt beneath the chapel hasn't held a body in generations, only records too old or too dangerous to keep upstairs where careless hands might find them. The air down here differs from the records hall, thinner, colder, a mineral bite settling at the back of the throat like something not meant to be breathed too deep. Odalise's candle throws light that doesn't reach the corners. What else lives in those corners stays unasked. Some questions are better left unanswered. It should be here. She counts stones along the far wall, pressing each one like testing for a weak tooth. My grandmother kept the old chapel records before Caesar had the position dissolved. She told me once there was a text down here, even the king wasn't permitted to read alone. Why would a king need permission to read anything in his own castle? Because some truths aren't dangerous to the realm. The stone she once gives under her palm with a grinding sound too loud for how small the movement is. They're dangerous to the men who've built their power on nobody finding them. The compartment behind the stone holds a single scroll case, sealed in wax gone brittle with age. Opening it takes shaking hands, not fear exactly, something closer to standing at the top of stairs in the dark, not knowing yet whether the next step is solid. The text inside carries a language drifted with age, formal enough to require a moment's leaning toward it before the words resolve, the way an unfamiliar accent needs settling into before it makes sense. But the names read clear. Names are always clear in prophecy. That's the cruelty and the mercy of it both. A daughter of 2 worlds, marked by loss twice paid and twice survived, will stand where mortal blood and old blood meet, and the crown will know her before the court does. 3 readings pass before the mind catches up to what it already understood on the first. Loss twice paid. 2 children. Not misfortune. Not a failing body. A price already paid, before any debt was ever known to exist. Sitting back on both heels in the dark lets that land the way something too large gets let down slowly, instead of caught standing up. Every year in this court carried the same quiet belief. Tolerated, nothing more. A mortal woman married into a bloodline old enough to remember when the harbor was still forest, kept around because a king had once wanted her and hadn't yet found reason to want otherwise. A whole architecture got built out of that belief. Every silence at dinner, every missed anniversary, every cold word from Rosario's mouth stacked like bricks into a house livable only because it stood unlucky to be here at all. That house is rubble now. Sitting inside it, the rubble makes more sense than the house ever did. Because the text doesn't say fortunate. It doesn't say chosen by a king's mercy. It says the crown will know her before the court does, which means this worth was never something Rosario gave to hold. It existed before his ring ever went on. It existed before Caesar decided a mortal wearing it was a problem worth centuries of quiet cruelty to solve. One palm presses flat against the parchment the way it once pressed against the plaster where the missing portrait used to hang, and for the first time since arriving in Juneau, the touch leaves something steadier behind instead of an ache. Odalise. The voice comes out rough and used to holding this particular shape of feeling. This is me. This has always been me. She doesn't answer right away, and when her eyes finally lift, her candle has gone very still in her hand, the flame barely moving, her gaze fixed somewhere past my shoulder toward the stairs. The sound reaches me half a second after her.
Boots.
More than 2 sets, moving with purpose down stone steps never meant to carry this much weight at once. Put it away, she whispers, but nowhere exists to put it. No time remains, the light from more than one torch already spilling gold across the crypt floor before either of us can move. Caesar's guards fill the doorway like they've been standing just beyond it the whole time, waiting for confirmation before moving. Maybe they were. The guard who let this passage happen too easily earns a second thought now. Too late. Understanding arriving that ease is its own kind of trap. Ashley Summers. The lead guard delivers the name like a formal charge, which a breath later proves to be exactly what it is. You are to come with us. By order of the King's Council, you stand accused of treason against the crown. Treason. The word tastes absurd here, on the floor of a crypt, proof of an entire name pressed against my chest. This is the truth. That's what's being punished. You are holding stolen property from a sealed archive. His eyes never move to the scroll. That's the detail that stops all breath. He already knows what's being held. He was never here to discover it. He came to take it before anyone else could see. Odalise steps between us, one hand raised, and the guard's arm moves fast enough that the result registers before the motion does, her candle hitting the floor, the flame gone, the dark swallowing everything except the torches at the door. Don't. Comes out steady now, steadier than 3 days ago would have allowed. Don't touch her. I'll come. The scroll gets taken before the arms do. Letting it go is necessary, for guards against one, and a truth that doesn't survive if it costs blood in a crypt no one will find in time. Torchlight meets the climb up the stairs, cold air biting at skin that hasn't felt open sky in 3 days, and the words stay held in this chest instead, where no guard's hand can reach them. The crown will know her before the court does. The parchment can be taken. This body can be dragged through a corridor built for smallness. What got read in that crypt cannot be unmade, and for the first time since arriving at this court, that certainty is enough to walk on. The chains are lighter than expected. That detail stands out at the doors of the great hall, waiting for them to open. Not the weight of the iron, but how little of it there is, a single band at each wrist, cold enough to burn faintly against skin that hasn't seen daylight in 3 days. Restraint without spectacle, someone's careful choice. Someone wanted this to look civilized. The words from the crypt hold steadier than fear does. The crown will know her before the court does. No parchment remains as proof, only the sentence, memorized so deep it sits under the ribs like something swallowed whole. For now, that has to be enough. The doors open on 400 years of frost, and every face in it turned toward the doorway. Caesar sits at the high table where Rosario should preside alone, close enough beside the throne that from a distance the two could be mistaken for equals. Rosario sits with both hands flat on the arms of his chair, spine straight, eyes fixed on the middle distance the way they were the night his voice said go to bed. Carved from ice, exactly the image he presents, and walking the length of that hall means resisting the urge to search his face for 4 seconds of remembered warmth, because need can't be afforded right now. Ashley Summers.
Caesar doesn't stand to say it.
He doesn't need to. You stand accused of theft from a sealed archive, of conspiracy against the crown, and a pause, timed the way a man times a blow sharpened for years, of the deaths of 2 attendants found in the East Wing 3 nights past. The hall doesn't gasp. Two controlled a room for that. But 400 bodies lean forward half an inch in unison, and understanding arrives, in the space of that motion, of exactly what kind of trap has just been walked into. No attendant in this castle has ever been touched by these hands. The voice holds steadier than expected. There's no knowledge of who. Their names were Fen and Odalric. Caesar's voice doesn't rise. It never does. That flatness is the most frightening thing about him, the way a gallows gets built out of a tone that never once sounds cruel. Found strangled the same night this thief was discovered stealing from the crypt archive. Physicians confirm the marks on their throats match a woman's hand. Those names belong to no one. That knowledge sits as certain as an age never needing to be checked. But the court's faces shift while he speaks, belief settling over the room like snow that's been waiting all winter for a reason to fall, and truth becomes visibly absent as the currency being spent in this hall tonight. Fear is the currency instead. Fear of a mortal woman with no bloodline anyone can name, standing where a queen should stand, threatening a balance every immortal in this room has built an entire existence around protecting. This is the same pattern. Louder now because silence can't be afforded either. Every threat to your control gets buried the same way. A ledger. A missing portrait. Now this. How many women came before this one that this court simply agreed to forget? For the first time, something flickers across Caesar's composure. Not fear yet, but the particular stillness of a man recalculating. Careful, he says softly. Grief makes women see conspiracies where there are only consequences. Rosario's face gets searched then, past him, for one unguarded second. Nothing. Not even the 4 seconds of warmth. Whatever's holding him has him further under than 3 nights ago, as though the castle itself understands what's at stake tonight and has tightened its grip accordingly. The doors at the back of the hall open. Not guards this time. Odalise, breathless, a bundle wrapped in cloth pressed against her chest like something carried through more than one set of stairs to reach here. My lady is proof, she says, voice shaking without breaking, that the court is owed the chance to hear. Caesar's composure cracks for exactly as long as it takes to say, this is not the venue for. Let her speak. The voice cutting across the hall belongs to neither of us. It's Rosario's, forced rough through a throat that seems to have forgotten how to use itself for anything but cold command. The whole court turns toward him. Caesar turns fastest of all, and for the first time all night something crosses his face that isn't calculation. Alarm. My king, Caesar starts. I said let her speak. Rosario's hands curl into fists on the arms of his throne, knuckles white, sheer will apparently the only thing holding him in place. His eyes find mine across the hall, and these aren't the eyes from dinner, not the flat court eyes of the last several weeks. Something fights its way to the surface in them, the same 4 seconds from 3 nights ago, except this time it doesn't slam shut. Odalise presses the scroll into chained hands. Unrolling it happens with fingers steady enough now, and the words already carried under the ribs get read aloud, into a silence so complete a heartbeat registers before the first sentence finishes. A daughter of 2 worlds, marked by loss twice paid and twice survived, will stand where mortal blood and old blood meet, and the crown will know her before the court does. The hall doesn't move. Somewhere behind, a woman makes a small sound, quickly stifled. Raising my eyes to the high table on the last line, the sight unfolds the way ice gives way on a lake, not all at once, but in a single visible crack that says everything after is only a matter of time. Rosario's eyes clear. Not slowly. Not gently. All at once, a held breath finally released. A man surfacing from water he didn't know he'd been drowning in until the air hits his face. His look finds mine, truly finds it, for the first time since before the cruelty started, and what moves across his features isn't confusion. Recognition. And underneath it, raw enough that the whole court sees it before armor can cover it back over, something that looks unmistakably like grief. For every version of this wife he's been forced to hurt, while some stolen version of his own voice wore his mouth like a mask. "Ashley," he says, and my name breaks entirely open in his voice, the way it used to, before any of this began. Caesar is already on his feet, already reaching for something at his sleeve, already understanding exactly how much is about to be lost. But he doesn't get his hand to whatever's hidden at his sleeve on time. Rosario moves faster. He always was even-bound, and something in him seems to know at the same instant this whole hall does, crossing the space between the throne and the high table in a single motion that doesn't look like walking at all, his hand closing around Caesar's wrist the way Caesar's magic has closed around his voice for longer than either of them understood. "Centuries," Rosario says, the word torn out of him rather than spoken. "You had me for centuries." Caesar doesn't struggle. That detail tells the whole hall how far his power has already slipped. A man that's certain of his grip would fight. He only watches Rosario's face with a particular stillness of someone doing arithmetic, the number left to lose growing smaller with every second. "I did what the crown required," Caesar says. Steady. The old tone still being tried, the one that used to move whole rooms. "It doesn't move this one. You did what you required." Rosario's grip doesn't loosen. "Love for a mortal woman. That's the whole of my crime in your accounting, isn't it? A king who valued a person over a kingdom, and you couldn't let one exist." The hall holds its breath the way a held breath holds itself, painfully, past the point of comfort, unwilling to be the first sound in a silence this large. Something finishes breaking in Rosario's face while this watches. Not the spell, that cracked already, back when a single voice read a prophecy into a room built to keep it buried. This is something else. A man arriving, fully, at the shape of everything done while someone else was wearing his hands. Caesar's wrist gets released. Rosario turns from him entirely, like a man setting down a weight he's finished carrying, and crosses the hall toward this wife instead. Meeting him halfway doesn't happen. Wanting to move closer still lives in this chest, an old reflex built into muscle before understanding caught up to what it was costing, but staying still feels right, chains still cold at both wrists, letting him close the whole distance himself. He kneels. Not the practiced kneel of court ceremony, the one every noble in this hall has performed 100 times without meaning a single motion of it. This is slower, harder. A king lowering himself in front of 400 witnesses like the position itself is a debt only now being understood. "Forgiveness for what happened isn't being asked for tonight," he says, and his voice carries to every corner of the hall, though only one listener matters to him. What these hands did while something else moved them, that's understood now. It doesn't make the wounds smaller. Blood was drawn by a blade held in this grip, even without being the one who sharpened it. Someone behind me lifts the chains away. The cold leaves both wrists, and no glance turns to see who did it. Eyes stay on him, kneeling, the whole weight of a court watching a king ask for something he cannot command. Ashley Summers is not who stands before you tonight. Rising now, turning to face the hall instead of me. His voice changes register, not the cold court flatness, something new, a man choosing words because they matter rather than because they're expected. The prophecy named her before I ever did. Restoration comes now, before this court and every immortal witness in it, as Queen of Juno in her own right and by her own blood, not as wife alone, but as sovereign beside me, with authority equal to any I hold. The hall stirs. Somewhere in the back, a sound rises that might be Odalise, might be a sob held since the crypt. Rosario turns back last. Wanting that too isn't being asked of you. No right remains to assume anything's wanted for me at all. His hand lifts the way it did in that chamber 3 nights ago, and this time it doesn't stop an inch short. It simply hangs open, an offer with nothing demanded attached to it. Only a chance to love you again, however long that takes, whatever proving it costs. His open hand holds my gaze for a long moment. 11 spires counted from a locked window come to mind. A ledger with dates written before the losses they claimed comes to mind. How easy it would be, after everything, to simply take the hand and call the ache finished. That thought comes too. The hand doesn't get taken yet. Ask again. Comes out instead, after a season spent believing you're still you. Not tonight. Not from cruelty, from finally understanding the difference between being wanted and being asked. Something moves through his face that isn't disappointment. It looks, instead, like relief. A man grateful the woman in front of him has finally learned to want on her own terms instead of his. Caesar's sentence comes an hour later, delivered by a council no longer under any spell to soften it. Execution, not exile, the old law finally permitted to speak plainly. The same law that named one mortal untouchable now naming him accountable, before every mortal and immortal witness the realm can gather. His face carries no fear when the verdict lands, only the particular disbelief of a man who spent centuries deciding other people's worth and never once imagined the ledger would turn back on him. Staying for the execution itself never happens. Some endings don't need witnessing to be real. What gets stayed for arrives months later, in a room warmer than any lived in during years as a queen unnamed, 3 heartbeats where only grief shaped like hope once lived, 2 sons and a daughter arriving within minutes of each other into a world that tried, twice, to make sure they never would. Holding them happens while Rosario stands at the edge of the bed, not touching, waiting the way he's waited every day of the season asked of him, and reaching for his hand this time comes from choice, not habit. Other women in this city wear crowns no one sees. Thinking of them happens sometimes, the ones still standing in courts that haven't cracked open yet, still counting their own footsteps down halls that were never built to hold them. That was a familiar position once. That silence is known well from the inside. If any part of this story found you there, know this much. Some of those stories are still being written. Not every court softens. Not every crown gets handed back. But some do. Stay close. This isn't finished here.